School is brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
All right, I'm Lindsay Smith with RealAgriculture.com. I'm joined today by Albert Tenuta. He's the field crop pathologist with OMAFRA. We are talking northern corn leaf blight. First off, give me sort of the synopsis of the differences in hybrids' resistance or tolerance to this disease.
So what we've seen with northern corn leaf blight is a steady progression of more northern corn leaf blight in many grower fields across the province of Ontario, as well as into the Midwest U.S. And a lot of those that would indicate that something's going on or something's changing in terms of the pathogen population and that. And what we've seen in our work with Agriculture Agri-Food Canada through a GFO and Growing Forwards 2 project is that we've seen a change in our isolates, in that the ability of those northern corn leaf blight races that have developed can bypass our main sources of resistance, and particularly when we think of HT1 gene. So now, where it used to be 90% or 85 to 90% effective, now it's maybe only 1 or 2% effective in most of the province, as well as the Midwest.
So farmers, as they're looking through and combing through the data to choose their hybrids, how might they best decide whether or not the hybrid has multiple forms of resistance? How do they sort of tease that data out?
Sure. One of the most important things is, have a good conversation with your dealer, particularly if you've seen an increase in northern corn leaf blight or any disease. It's important. So scouting, we can't overemphasize the importance of knowing what's going on in your fields, and every field is different. So just because you have a disease in one field may not mean you have that same disease in other fields, and that's regardless whether corn, soybeans, wheat, canola, etc. in there. And so every field should be treated differently as well. So look at Ask first of all, what are the sources of resistance? Many of the larger companies that do disease testing know what genes might be in there. Besides HT1, are you looking at HT2, HT3, which has been very effective against the races that we found in Ontario. Also ask in terms of look at the ratings. Do you see one that has better ratings to northern corn leaf blight or other diseases in there? That would usually indicate to you as well if they've got a better tolerance or maybe a mix of those genes.
Through your work, you did share some data on the most consistent payback for fungicide timing. When is that?
So for our work, as well as others that we've worked with our colleagues in the U.S., is that VT, so that tassel to R1 silking period has been the most consistent. Now, having said that, applications prior to that, so in the vegetative stage, so 6, 7, 8 leaf stage, may be beneficial, particularly if it's later on in the vegetative stage, where we've got disease development that has started early, and it's a more susceptible corn hybrid, for instance, or where we've seen a situation where the plants have been delayed in terms of planting, such as maybe this past year, where we were out of sync with our normal planting. So as the inoculum load builds up, those younger plants become infected. That can have an impact. So remember, an earlier infection begins, the greater potential over the course of the season that those diseases could impact that plant. But for our perspective, the most return on investment, most consistent return on investment to producers has been that tassel to silking stage.
Now, 2014, of course, we had unseasonable, cool, not a very fun summer, not a great summer. Yeah. And of course that slowed corn development. Does it ever pay to go in and spray later?
Well, and that was one of the questions. And the same thing, whether it was northern corn leaf blight, white mold, others, because of that extended growing season, growers were asking if we came in later, in those late, would we still have an impact? And most of what we saw, both in soybeans and corn, we didn't see that payback per se. We can, if you were looking at, say, ear molds or some of those where you're targeting the ear with a fungicide application more so, that can help because you're targeting a little later anyway, and that subsequently will give you some disease protection there as well. But overall, you're still better off targeting those early reproductive stages than late. And even then, those late stages, we're never sure where the end of that season is going to be as well.
You also did do a comparison of the payback of a properly timed fungicide application that, as you said, you know, when corn prices are up, it's easy to make that call. But where does the break even, does it pay still to protect your $3 corn?
Well, yeah, and I think it does. It depends. Again, for every grower in every field, there's certain risk factors that need to be considered. So hybrids. You know, your hybrid is more susceptible, less susceptible. History of the disease. A lot of these diseases that we've seen an increase on are ones that are, the risk is coming within that grower's field. So they are residue-borne diseases or soil-borne diseases within that field. And that's also a good indication as you're scouting and you're looking, where's the disease coming from or developing is important. So if you see the disease development starting from the soil up on the lower leaves and working their way up, that tells you the risk has come from your own field as opposed to being blown in elsewhere, where you'll see it more in the upper canopy and those things. So for, as you said, with an $8 corn, it's pretty easy. You need, you know, 3-4 bushels and that for return. On $3 corn, $4 corn, you're looking at probably, you know, 7-8 bushels. And with our data and our pool data with Dave Hooker at Ridgetown here, over 11,000 comparisons, we had almost a 6 bushel increase 50% of the time. So it's a 50-50 now, which is much different than what we would have talked about 2 or 3 years ago, or even earlier than that. But again, looking at all those risk factors from hybrids to field history to the weather conditions, the growth stage, all of those things is important, and that can increase your likelihood of that return on investment.
Last question. Someone in the audience today here at SPAC did ask if it pays to watch the disease development of northern corn leaf blight in other geographies, so outside of Ontario. But as you said, of course, you can sort of tell in the field if it's coming from your own field or your neighbors. So how far does the disease travel, and does it really pay to sort of monitor other areas?
Well, we always monitor other areas, and you know, not only monitor, but we're part of many of the working groups that are there with our colleagues in both Canada as well as the US. And part of that is not even monitoring the disease as it progresses through the season, but also learning about, are they starting to see hybrids or sources of resistance that are now succumbing to the diseases, because those are really good early warning systems for us. That could indicate that you're starting to see new races developing in other geographies that we don't see here yet. But over time, as they start moving up, and many of these wind-blown spores will move, you know, in case of northern corn leaf blight, you're probably looking at miles or hundreds of miles as opposed to thousands of miles, right? So it's more localized than, say, rust spores and those. But it's really important to not only think locally, but also regionally as well.
But Ontario's got enough of its own, it doesn't need to worry about anybody else's.
Unfortunately, we're pretty good at developing our own endemic pathogen populations out there.
All right. Okay, thank you so much, Albert.
Thank you.